Beedrill. This deck actually took some fine-tuning because I've always really liked this deck, but could not really get it on a competitive level no matter what format I was trying it in. I think the most consistent format I ever had it in was like base Neo, but that's only because it had 4 copies of Cleffa. And so when I was doing other base gym decks, I was like, you know what, I'm going to bring over Koga's Beedrill. I'm just going to cut the Cleffa, and most of the rest of it stays the same. So it's not as stable of a build, but it's still fun as shit to play. Hyper Needle is pretty useful, especially if you're up against like a Haymaker deck, because you can just Oko, a Hitmonchan, a Scyther, Magmar, Electabuzz, but it's off a coin flip, which is pretty risky. The real draw for me here, at least, is Nerve Poison, because you can use it on turn 2. We will get to that here in a second, but it does 20 damage and has the chance, off a coin flip, to both paralyze and poison your opponent's Pokemon, which is well worth the risk. You know, 20 damage for 2 energy, that's fine, whatever, but having the ability to both poison and paralyze means that you're most likely going to be getting at least 40 damage off of those 2 energy because of the poison between turns. Of course, your opponent can get out of it if they have a switch or a warp point, but they're not always going to have those handy. Before we get into the build, I do want to clarify something, and that is Koga's Kakuna's Pokemon power, which is Emerge, which allows you to flip a coin, and if head, search your deck for Koga's Beedrill and go ahead and slap it on top of Koga's Kakuna. And it even specifies this counts as evolving Koga's Kakuna, so by traditional rules, you can't evolve from Koga's Weedle into Koga's Kakuna and then evolve it again into Koga's Beedrill on the same turn, but Wizards of the Coast did make an official ruling about Emerge that I will read verbatim per the rulings compendium. Koga's Kakuna's Emerge Pokemon power breaks the standard can't evolve turn 1 or the turn it was played rule. Since this power has you take a card from your deck and place it, it is not stopped by the standard evolution limits. This falls under the term played. Aerodactyl's Pokemon power Prehistoric power says no more evolution cards can be played. The Emerge power would not be affected by this as those cards are not played. So by current understandings of the rules, that is false. But if you are playing within the Wizards of the Coast rulings, then well, you can get off a Nerve Poison on turn 2. And with the right coin flips, that is a lot of pressure to put on your opponent so early in the game, even for a format so fast-paced as base gym. What else makes this deck fun? Well, it's more than just coin flips, so let's get into the build. We're going to be starting off with 3 copies of Koga's Weedle. We're going to be running a 3-3-3 line of this Pokemon. And yeah, it's going to be a bit of a risk to have on the bench mid to late game, as it's pretty easy for any deck to deal 40 damage. But that's the risk you take, as we talked about earlier. On turn 2, you can evolve that Koga's Weedle into Koga's Kakuna, and then immediately use its Pokemon power Emerge. So if you hit heads on that coin flip, you can go ahead and evolve straight into Koga's Beedrill. It's like a built-in Pokemon breeder almost. It just requires more cards and a coin flip, so not nearly as good, but that's okay too, as Koga's Beedrill does make up for the need for those coin flips, as it does come right out of the gate hitting with Nerve Poison on turn 2 with the right setup. Now if you've ever played a Koga's Beedrill deck, you know that you need a sponge on the bench. We'll get to why later, but there's no better sponge than a base set Chansey. So we've got 2 copies of that in here, and then also a copy of Kangaskhan for if you want a sponge that can also allow you to draw a card. This is a great card to have if you get trainer locked. A Psyduck or Vileplume. Same thing for Scyther. It's a great sponge that has free retreat, so you can always put it in the active position, retreat it to the bench for free, get that Koga's Beedrill back into the active so you can keep attacking. Now for draw support, we got 3 copies of Bill in this deck, as well as 2 copies of Professor Oak. A little lighter on the draw support for a base gym deck, but you don't want to be drawing too hard, because in order to get that turn 2 combo off with Koga's Kakuna, Emerge is pulling from the deck, so you don't want to have all of the Koga's Beedrill in your hand, because then Emerge is not going to have any effect. You're going to have to wait that extra turn to evolve up. A full playset of Item Finder, because in part this is a stall deck. I mean, it's got Chansey in it. Of course, you're going to be doing some stalling, and there are some trainers that you want to continuously recycle in order to keep that stall going. Get it in balance with the amount of damage you're actually dealing with Koga's Beedrill. So you will want to reuse cards like Pokemon Center, Mr. Fuji, Ninja Trick, even some, board shifting cards like Warp Point and Gust of Wind are going to be useful depending on whatever the board is looking like. So a full playset of Pokemon Center so that you can ensure that your sponges are able to sponge as much as they possibly can. Mr. Fuji is also another great alternative for if you don't want to use a Pokemon Center. You can just Fuji it straight back into your deck. That way it's not a risk on your bench, and it can also help keep you from decking out before your opponent, since this is a stall deck. This deck has a good balance of different parts, so you are dealing damage with Koga's Beedrill, hopefully off of those nerve poison coin flips, but you're also paralyzing your opponent, which helps you gain an extra turn in a lot of cases. You're also stalling by using Koga's Ninja Trick to trick your Koga's Beedrill back onto the bench. Get a Chansey or Kangaskhan out there in the active position so that they're absorbing the damage for you, so the Koga's Beedrill isn't taking too much. Well, it's also part stall, as we've been talking about, but there's also a disruption part to it, where you have Gust of Wind, you have Warp Point, to get those Koga Beedrill back into the active position after a Chansey has sponged up some damage. But also, that Gust of Wind is going to be pulling out vulnerable Pokemon into the active position, Pokemon that don't have a lot of energy on them. Or if they do have energy, you can hit them with any of the 4 copies of energy removal in this deck, just to keep your opponent from doing what they're trying to do while you're slowly chipping away at them with that nerve poison, stalling for a lot of the game so that your opponent is using up a lot of their resources. Meanwhile, you just keep recycling these trainer cards that help you out with Item Finder. You keep healing up your Pokemon, depriving your opponent of those prizes, which Fuchsia City Gym also helps with, as it's like a permanent Mr. Fuji that you can utilize for your Koga Pokemon. Off of a coin flip, of course, because why the fuck would Pokemon let you have any fun at all in a match without having to flip a coin? 4 copies of Double Colorless Energy, not just for Koga's Beedrill's big attack, but also if you want to power up a Chansey, more likely a Kangaskhan, you can do that. Or you could even go for the Swords Dance / combo off of that Scyther if you really wanted to. A full playset of Full Heal Energy as well. Those most likely are going to be used on Chansey or Kangaskhan for if they do get paralyzed or hit with another special condition like Confusion off of a Dark Gloom. You can attach a Full Heal Energy, get rid of that special condition, and then discard the Full Heal Energy in order to retreat that Chansey back to the bench, avoid having to use a Warp Point to get it there. The rest of the deck's going to be filled out with 6 Grass Energy, and I know that the strategy with Koga's Beedrill for most decks is going for that high damage Hyper Needle on turn 2, which is a completely valid strategy because you can use Mr. Fuji and Fuchsia Gym to remove it from play, get it back into play as fast as possible using Emerge, and then go for another Needling. But I do find myself relying more on Nerve Poison across matches. I know the Kangaskhan does disrupt the flow a little bit because its retreat cost is so high. It's really just in there as a backup for if you do get trainer locked. If you're not worried about trainer lock at all, kick that Kangaskhan out of there, throw in another Scyther. Scyther is a great damage sponge to pair with Chansey because it's got that free retreat, and it also covers Chansey's weakness with its own resistance. And I will add that Koga's Pidgey is another great utility card for searching your deck, especially if you have been trainer locked. So that might be a good replacement for a Kangaskhan, or just another great addition to do a 1 or 2 of. That way you have a way to reliably search through your deck on your off turns. The only problem is you have to keep reattaching that energy to use Messenger every time when you really want to be using that energy per turn on your Beedrills. And make sure that you do not sleep on Koga's Kakuna. It is a threat all its own. I know that the coin flipping can get really annoying, but even if you miss the coin flip on Emerge, Toxic Secretion for 1 grass energy is not bad at all. You can still attach a ninja trick onto Kakuna to make sure it's relatively safe from knockout. Still go for that Toxic Secretion, and if you hit the heads, you put a lot of pressure on your opponent because they're either going to have to switch or rack up damage a lot faster than they originally anticipated. And that's base gem Koga's Beedrill. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want to know more about Beedrill cards in general, stay tuned for the next video. It's going to be a TCG history on Beedrill. Messing around with this deck and some recent developments in the competitive scene have piqued my interest, and I just made a full-on video about Beedrill. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.